It is Friday, the 26th of June, 2026. I've been closely monitoring the Strait of Hormuz all night, and what I'm seeing is deeply concerning. A Singapore-flagged cargo ship was attempting to exit the strait using the southern route that hugs the Omani coast, the very corridor the United States military has been actively defending and designating as the protected pathway under the current ceasefire framework. Yet an IRGC drone still found the vessel. In my analysis, this was no accident. Central Command responded within moments by releasing imagery showing an F-16 carrying APKWS laser-guided rockets precision munitions, specifically designed to neutralize Shahed-type drones at a fraction of the cost of traditional air-to-air missiles. The same aircraft was also seen armed with a GBU-54 precision-guided bomb, signaling that American forces are prepared to strike far beyond just the drones themselves. Later this afternoon, there are indications a significant announcement may be forthcoming. Whether that involves renewed strikes against Iranian targets or further diplomatic efforts remains unclear. What is clear, however, is that the IRGC continues to broadcast its intention to collect transit fees in the Strait of Hormuz, while deliberately pushing commercial shipping toward the northern route along the Iranian coastline, near chokepoints where their remaining small craft can still operate. As I review the latest reports, one thing stands out. Iran is openly challenging the agreed-upon rules of this fragile ceasefire, and I believe this provocation carries serious implications for what comes next. Central Command responded with remarkable speed. Within minutes of the incident, they released clear imagery of an F-16 operating at altitude over the region. No press conference, no lengthy public statement, just the visible presence of American air power delivering a silent but unmistakable message. I must emphasize how significant this is. The aircraft was shown carrying APKWS laser-guided rockets and a GBU-54 precision-guided bomb. This combination tells me that the United States is not only prepared to intercept individual drones in flight, but can also strike the command and control nodes where IRGC operators are based. Later that afternoon, President Trump issued a direct public statement. He confirmed that Iran had fired at least 4 one-way attack drones at vessels transiting the strait. One drone struck the upper deck of a large cargo vessel, causing damage but allowing the ship to continue its voyage. The other 3 were successfully intercepted and destroyed. The president characterized the incident as a clear and unacceptable violation of the ceasefire agreement. In my view, this statement puts Iran firmly on notice. The F-16 and AH-64 Apache platforms now stand as the primary assets positioned to address this growing drone threat. As I analyze the situation, it becomes increasingly evident that American forces are maintaining a high state of readiness while still exercising considerable restraint. The IRGC, however, continues its aggressive posture. They are still attempting to assert unilateral authority over maritime traffic, warning that any consequences from vessels using unauthorized routes will fall on the ship owners, operators, and captains. This brazen challenge to international norms is exactly what I feared would test the limits of the current diplomatic framework. Here's the part that genuinely concerns me from a diplomatic standpoint. Senior administration officials, including the Secretary of State and the Vice President, have been working intensely to give Iran every reasonable opportunity to honor the terms of the ceasefire and keep the Strait of Hormuz functionally open for international commerce. And yet, even as formal negotiations continue in Switzerland and elsewhere, elements within the IRGC appear determined to undermine those very efforts. Whether this represents a deliberate negotiating tactic or rogue factions operating outside the consensus of Iran's leadership is still unclear. Either way, as I assess the situation, this kind of disruptive behavior is precisely what risks collapsing the fragile diplomatic progress achieved so far. I've been watching this pattern closely. The IRGC continues acting aggressively toward commercial vessels that refuse to comply with their self-imposed toll structure. By striking a ship several miles off the Omani coast, well within the internationally recognized southern corridor, they are sending a clear signal. They do not accept the legitimacy of the American protected route. This incident, in my opinion, crosses a dangerous threshold. It directly challenges the core understanding of the ceasefire agreement. President Trump's statement has now put Tehran firmly on notice about the potential consequences. The F-16S and AH-64 Apaches, currently operating in the region, are more than capable of delivering a swift and proportionate response. What worries me most is the timing. Iran's foreign minister was reportedly engaged in direct discussions with his Omani counterpart at almost the exact moment the drone strike occurred. This contradiction between diplomatic talks and military provocation creates a deeply troubling picture. It suggests either a serious lack of coordination within the Iranian system or a calculated strategy of applying pressure while pretending to negotiate in good faith. As I see it, this behavior will likely force the United States to respond more directly in the near term. The question is no longer whether a response is coming, but how measured or how forceful it will ultimately be. Within minutes of the incident, Central Command released imagery of an F-16 operating at altitude over the region. As I examine the latest intelligence, the full picture of American military posture in the Strait of Hormuz becomes strikingly clear. The United States maintains a formidable layered presence. Multiple F-16 Block 50 and Block 52 fighters remain on patrol, working in close coordination with AH-64 Apache helicopters equipped with APKWS laser-guided rockets. These Apaches are actively hunting drones over open water. While some A-10 Warthog aircraft have returned to base, the primary workhorses right now are the F-16S and Apaches, both demonstrating considerable tactical restraint even as Iranian provocations continue. I've been particularly impressed by the naval component. The U.S. Navy has positioned several Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers anchoring the southern transit corridor. These vessels are far more than simple patrol ships. They carry the Aegis Combat System, the most advanced integrated naval air defense architecture in existence, specifically designed to counter drone swarms and cruise missile threats. As I analyze the current deployment, this represents a carefully calibrated show of force. The destroyers are constructing what amounts to a naval fortress around the protected southern route, yet American forces continue to exercise significant restraint. They are giving diplomacy room to work, while remaining ready to respond instantly if directed. The F-16S, in both Block 50 and Block 52 configurations, are particularly well suited for this mission. They can carry HARM missiles for radar suppression and GBU, 5-4 precision-guided bombs to target IRGC command nodes on the islands scattered throughout the strait. Meanwhile, the Apaches, with their longbow radar systems, provide critical nighttime drone hunting capability despite the inherent risks of operating in contested airspace. This is not a hasty reaction. It is a measured, professional military posture that has been carefully maintained throughout this crisis. In my assessment, the United States possesses overwhelming capability in theater, yet continues to prioritize de-escalation where possible. However, with the IRGC still pushing commercial traffic toward dangerous northern routes and attempting to enforce their illegal toll system, I believe this delicate balance is becoming increasingly difficult to sustain. The American military is ready positioned, capable, and increasingly likely to escalate its response if Iran's provocations continue unchecked. It is worth asking why, given the overwhelming scale of American military capability already demonstrated throughout this conflict, the United States has not simply continued an unrestrained campaign against Iran's remaining military infrastructure. As I analyze the strategic picture, the reasoning becomes clear. The primary concern centers on preventing a prolonged closure of the Strait of Hormuz, which would cause severe damage to the global economy. With energy markets already sensitive, any extended disruption would directly impact gas prices and broader economic stability in the United States, particularly critical heading into upcoming elections. In my view, this explains the current posture of calculated restraint. Rather than broad, indiscriminate strikes, the United States appears focused on smaller, proportional, kinetic responses targeted specifically at the IRGC Navy elements responsible for these provocations. This approach allows commercial traffic to continue flowing through the southern corridor while still demonstrating that such aggressive behavior carries real consequences. I believe this is a deliberate strategic choice. By maintaining pressure without triggering a full-scale shutdown of the strait, American leadership is balancing military strength with economic pragmatism. However, as Iranian provocations persist, I see the window for this measured approach narrowing. The capability for much stronger action remains fully in place, should the situation demand it. Let's walk through exactly what happened roughly 18 hours before this incident, because the sequencing is crucial to understanding Iran's intentions. As I reviewed the timeline, the IRGC issued a direct warning to all commercial shipping operators. They demanded that vessels must coordinate with Iranian naval authorities and use only the designated northern route along their coastline. This demand is directly connected to Iran's weakened naval position. After suffering significant losses to their blue water navy, even the southern corridor near the Omani coast has become difficult for their remaining small fast attack craft to reach effectively. By forcing commercial traffic closer to their own shores, Iran ensures their limited assets can still intimidate and harass passing ships. Despite this pressure, the American-approved Southern Corridor has continued to see substantial use, with reports indicating well over 100 vessels safely transiting that route in the past week alone. However, the IRGC managed to locate and strike one vessel several miles off the Omani coast, hitting the bridge directly. UK maritime trade operations quickly confirmed the incident. In a particularly alarming development, the International Maritime Organization immediately halted evacuation operations for previously stranded vessels in the region. This raises serious concerns that thousands of mariners could now remain effectively trapped in the Gulf. Notably, at almost the exact same moment the strike occurred, Iran's foreign minister was engaged in direct discussions with Oman's foreign minister about the future administration of the strait. This contradiction speaks volumes. Central Command responded swiftly by releasing F-16 patrol imagery within minutes. Not yet a kinetic strike, but a clear signal that American forces are watching closely and retain the ability to target both the drones and the operators behind them. Let's examine in detail the key platforms currently positioned to respond if this situation continues to escalate. In my assessment, the southern Omani corridor, the exact route Iran has labeled as illegitimate, remains the central focus of this dispute. The F-16 in Block 50 and Block 52 configurations stands out as one of the most capable and versatile platforms in theater right now. These fighters are specifically built for this kind of mission profile. They can carry HARM missiles for radar suppression, homing in on enemy radar emissions, alongside the GBU-54 precision-guided bomb. This gives them the ability to strike IRGC Navy command nodes and special operations infrastructure spread across the islands in the strait. Most importantly for the current threat, they are loaded with APKWS laser-guided rockets, making them highly effective in the counter-drone role that is in highest demand. I consider the AH-64 Apache to be the primary drone hunting platform operating along the southern route. Equipped with the AN/APG-78 longbow radar system, each Apache can detect, classify, and prioritize dozens of contacts simultaneously, including the small one-way attack drones that currently pose the greatest risk to commercial shipping. Operating at night carries genuine risk, as Iran has shown some ability to target helicopters with drones under darkness, but the Apache's AGM-114 Hellfire missile variants remain devastatingly effective against fast attack craft. If a meaningful number of Apaches were deployed simultaneously, Iran's remaining small boat capability could be neutralized very quickly. There is also a less discussed but highly efficient counter-drone system worth highlighting: remotely operated ground or ship-based launchers that fire the same APKWS laser-guided rockets. Guided by radar and electro-optical infrared sensors, these systems offer a significant economy of force advantage. At approximately $20,000 per engagement, they stand in stark contrast to million-dollar air-to-air missiles when countering relatively low-cost Iranian drones. The naval backbone remains anchored by Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers. These vessels, equipped with the Aegis combat system, provide comprehensive layered air defense coverage across the corridor. They are not merely defensive platforms, they create a formidable fortress that protects commercial shipping while maintaining the ability to project power if needed. As I review the entire force package, the integration is impressive. F-16S overhead, Apaches hunting at lower altitudes, destroyers securing the sea lanes, and ground-based systems filling critical gaps. This represents a complete, multi-domain response architecture already in position and ready to act. What strikes me most is the level of sustained tactical restraint the United States has shown. Despite possessing overwhelming capability to degrade Iran's remaining military assets, American forces continue to prioritize protecting the flow of global commerce over broader escalation. This measured approach reflects a clear strategic calculation: keep the strait open while still deterring Iranian aggression through targeted proportional responses. However, with each new provocation, the margin for continued patience narrows. The platforms I've described are not just present, they are optimized for exactly this scenario. Should Iran choose to test American resolve further, the response capability sitting in theater is both substantial and immediate. And now, turning to a significant development in the global picture, a major story continues to unfold in Ukraine, where drone warfare technology is advancing at a remarkable pace. As I've been tracking, recent footage shows Ukrainian one-way attack drones penetrating deep into Russian territory, striking strategic targets, including a major gas processing facility located several hundred miles from the border. There are also credible reports of successful strikes against key Russian production infrastructure. In response, Russia claims to have intercepted several hundred Ukrainian drones in a single recent night, highlighting the intense scale of this ongoing aerial exchange. In my analysis, Ukraine appears to be pursuing a sustained campaign of increased long-range strikes. The objective seems twofold: to achieve meaningful strategic damage to Russia's war-sustaining industries and to apply pressure on Russian leadership ahead of any potential renewed negotiations. This parallel development in drone technology is particularly relevant to the situation in the Strait of Hormuz, as both conflicts demonstrate how relatively low-cost unmanned systems are reshaping modern warfare and challenging traditional military superiority. Iran's targeting of that specific vessel was almost certainly not accidental. As I analyze the broader pattern, this strike reflects a deliberate attempt by Iran to establish what they characterize as a new administrative authority over the Strait of Hormuz, one positioned for ongoing negotiations not just with the United States, but directly with Oman as well. Given the current 60-day negotiation window, Iran appears intent on demonstrating continued strength, intimidating its Gulf neighbors, and creating a de facto IRGC-controlled authority structure over the strait, regardless of whatever formal agreements eventually emerge. In my view, there should be little illusion that this new framework would represent anything other than an extension of IRGC control dressed in bureaucratic language. Iran has historically resisted the southern Omani route, and what we are witnessing now is simply an escalation of that long-standing position. By striking a ship in the internationally recognized corridor, they are deliberately attempting to undermine confidence in its safety. The financial incentive driving this behavior is substantial. Analysts estimate that successful control over strait administration and associated fees could generate tens of billions of dollars annually for Iran, money that hardline elements within the IRGC seem unwilling to abandon despite the clear risk of renewed American military action. I believe this creates a dangerous internal tension within Iran. While civilian negotiators presumably seek broader sanctions relief and resumed oil exports, hardline IRGC factions are using provocative actions as leverage to extract maximum concessions. This pattern of diplomatic progress, repeatedly interrupted by unilateral IRGC provocations, has become all too familiar throughout this conflict. The core question now is whether this latest incident represents an isolated provocation that can be addressed through a measured response, or whether it signals a broader, coordinated campaign of harassment. Given the institutional incentives driving IRGC behavior, I expect continued friction unless the final negotiating framework directly addresses their ability to disrupt maritime traffic. In my assessment, Iran is testing exactly how much disruptive behavior the current diplomatic structure can absorb before triggering a decisive American response. They are using this pressure as leverage while simultaneously hoping to secure economic relief. It is a difficult balance to maintain, especially when American military capability and willingness to respond proportionally have already been clearly demonstrated. What happens in the coming days will likely reveal whether Iran's hardline factions truly believe they can continue extracting concessions through these tactics without fatally undermining the broader diplomatic process their own leadership has worked to establish. The technical capability behind any potential American response remains substantial and is already positioned in theater. F-16S, armed with APKWS rockets and GBU-54 bombs, AH-64 Apaches with longbow radar and Hellfire missiles, guided missile destroyers running the Aegis system, and cost-effective ground-based counter-drone platforms all stand ready. As I assess the situation, what happens over the next 48 hours will be critical. Will we see additional targeted kinetic strikes against the specific IRGC elements responsible for this latest provocation? Or will the broader diplomatic framework continue to absorb this friction without triggering a more direct military response? In my opinion, the answer depends heavily on whether this incident proves to be an isolated rogue action or part of a coordinated pattern designed to extract further concessions. Iran's hardline factions appear to be gambling that they can push the limits without collapsing the entire negotiation process from which they desperately need economic relief. I will continue tracking this situation closely and provide updates as it develops, alongside the evolving events in Ukraine. What do you think happens here over the next 48 hours? Do you believe we will see measured American strikes, or will diplomacy manage to contain this latest escalation? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.